Mr. Karim had everything that people usually dream about. He had a large house with shining floors, tall windows, and expensive furniture. Outside the house, there were gardens filled with flowers, fountains, and even a swimming pool. He owned many cars, all parked neatly in the garage. He had businesses that made him a lot of money every single day. On the outside, anyone who saw him thought he must be the happiest man in the world. But deep inside, Karim carried a loneliness that no one could see. Every night after finishing work, he would drive back to his big mansion. The moment he opened the main door, he would be welcomed by silence. There was no laughter, no footsteps running in the halls, and no warm voice waiting to ask him about his day. Instead, the only sound came from the ticking of the giant clock in the living room. He would often switch on the television only to reduce that silence, but even the noise from the TV felt empty. He had workers in the house, cleaners, gardeners, and a cook, but they were not family. They did their jobs and left. Karim noticed that while they respected him, they also feared him because of his strict and serious face. Nobody dared to joke with him or speak freely. This made him even more alone. He would eat his meals at a long dining table that could easily seat 10 people, yet every night he sat there by himself. The echo of the spoon against the plate reminded him that he was the only one in the house who mattered. Karim had once believed that money was everything. In his younger years, he had worked day and night to earn more and more. While his friends were enjoying life, he was busy building his empire. He didn't have time for relationships, family gatherings, or even simple outings. At that time, he thought that once he became rich, happiness would automatically follow. But now that he was older and wealthier than he had ever imagined, he realized something was missing. He often sat in his study room late at night, surrounded by books, files, and awards. The walls displayed certificates of achievement and photographs of him shaking hands with powerful people. Yet none of those pictures showed a smile that came from the heart. Sometimes he picked up an old photo of his parents, who had passed away long ago. They had always told him, "Money is important, but family gives true happiness." He had ignored their words then, but now they echoed in his mind louder than ever. There were moments when he stood by the window, looking outside at the street below. He could see families walking together, children holding their parents' hands, couples laughing, and neighbors greeting one another. He noticed how simple those people's lives were compared to his, yet they seemed much richer in spirit. This comparison pricked his heart. He had money, but they had love. Sometimes, Karim thought about adopting a pet, maybe a dog or a cat, to reduce his loneliness. But then he told himself that a pet could not replace a human bond. What he truly longed for was companionship, someone to call him father, someone who would love him not for his money but for who he was as a person. However, he always brushed away the thought, convincing himself that it was too late for such dreams. Business kept him busy, but even his work no longer gave him the same excitement. Meetings, deals, and profits felt repetitive. He had reached a point where success did not surprise him anymore. His heart was searching for something new, something meaningful, but he did not know what it was. His evenings were the hardest. After dinner, he would walk through the empty halls of his mansion. The sound of his footsteps echoed against the marble floors. Sometimes he would stop and stare at the walls, imagining how they would look if they were filled with family photos, children growing up, birthdays, celebrations. But all he saw was plain decoration, paintings bought from galleries, and expensive art that had no life in it. On weekends, he tried to distract himself by traveling or attending social gatherings. But even there, he felt out of place. People came to him to discuss business or ask for favors, not to spend genuine time with him. At parties, laughter surrounded him, but it was not his own laughter. He often returned home feeling more alone than before. As days passed, this emptiness started weighing heavier on him. He wondered if life would always remain like this, successful but hollow. He sometimes thought, what will happen to all this wealth after me? Who will inherit it? Who will remember me not as a businessman, but as a human being? These questions disturbed his peace. Karim's loneliness became so deep that he began to notice small details around him more than before. When he saw little children selling flowers or polishing shoes on the street, he felt something stir in his heart. He wondered what kind of life they had, how much love or pain they carried. Sometimes he slowed his car near them, just to watch silently before driving away. His heart would ache, but he never stopped. One rainy evening, however, his life took a turn he could not have imagined. That day, after a long meeting, he was driving home as usual. The rain poured heavily, and the road was slippery. As he neared a quiet street, his headlights caught sight of two small figures sitting by the roadside. He slowed down and saw that they were children shivering, wet, and holding on to each other for warmth. Their eyes were filled with fear and exhaustion. Karim's car stopped almost on its own, as if his heart had commanded it. At that moment, Karim felt something unusual. It was not just sympathy, it was a pull, a strong feeling that he could not ignore. For the first time in many years, his heart whispered that maybe his loneliness had an answer, and it was sitting right there on the roadside. Karim sat inside his car, staring at the two children by the roadside. The rain poured heavily, making their small bodies shiver. They looked weak, as if they had not eaten properly for days. The boy seemed slightly older, maybe around 10, while the little girl beside him appeared no older than 7. They clung to each other for warmth, their thin clothes soaked through, and their bare feet pressed against the wet ground. For a moment, Karim simply watched them through the glass. He could have driven away, like he had done many times before when he saw poor children on the streets. But something inside him refused to let him go this time. His heart felt heavy, and his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Finally, with a deep breath, he opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. The children looked up, frightened. They did not know who this man was or what he wanted. The boy quickly pulled his sister closer, as if protecting her. Karim walked slowly toward them, trying not to scare them more. His voice softened as he spoke, "Why are you sitting here, children? Where are your parents?" The boy hesitated. His lips trembled as he answered, We don't have anyone. Our parents are gone." Karim felt his chest tighten at those words. He crouched down to meet their eyes. "Gone? What do you mean?" Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. She whispered, "They died, some time ago. We have nowhere to go." The rain continued to fall, but Karim barely noticed it. He saw the fear, the hunger, and the sadness in their innocent faces. They reminded him of his own childhood, the days when his parents had cared for him before leaving him too soon. He had been older when he lost them, but even then the pain had been unbearable. How much harder it must have been for these little ones. "What are your names?" Karim asked gently. The boy spoke first. "My name is Ayan, and this is my sister, Mira." Karim repeated their names slowly, as if trying to remember them deeply. "Ayan and Mira," he said softly, almost like a father speaking to his own children. He looked at their small hands, holding each other tightly, refusing to let go. Something stirred in his heart, stronger than before. He realized he could not leave them there. His mansion, filled with empty rooms and untouched food, suddenly seemed meaningless when compared to these two little souls sitting in the cold rain. Without thinking much, he stretched out his hand. "Come with me. You can't stay here like this." The children glanced at each other nervously. They had seen many people on the streets before, some kind, some cruel. Trust did not come easily. Ayan shook his head slightly. We don't know you. Why should we go with you?" Karim admired the boy's courage. Despite his young age, he was already acting like a guardian for his sister. Karim's voice grew even softer. "Because you need a safe place. I promise I will not hurt you. I have a home, food, and warm clothes. You don't have to suffer here." Still, the boy hesitated. Mira tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Bye. I'm so cold. I'm so hungry." Her words broke Ayan's heart. He looked back at Karim, trying to decide whether to trust him. The man standing before them did not look cruel. His eyes, though serious, carried warmth. Slowly, Ayan nodded. Karim immediately took off his own coat and wrapped it around the children. Then he guided them gently to his car. They sat quietly in the back seat, their small bodies shivering under the coat. Karim started the engine and began to drive, glancing at them through the mirror from time to time. The ride was silent at first. The children stared out of the window, still unsure of what awaited them. Karim thought carefully about what to say. Finally, he asked, "How long have you been alone?" Ayan answered in a low voice. "Since last year. After our parents died, we stayed with some relatives, but they didn't want us. They said they couldn't feed us. So we left. We have been living on the streets since then." Karim's heart ached as he listened. He imagined the nights they must have spent under the open sky, the hunger they must have felt, the fear of strangers. He clenched the steering wheel, wishing he could erase their pain. When they reached the mansion, the children's eyes widened. They had never seen anything so big. The tall gates opened, and the car drove inside. The gardens, the lights, the fountains, it all felt like another world to them. But instead of being excited, they looked more nervous. This place seemed too grand, too strange for children who had lived on the streets. As Karim led them inside, the warmth of the house surrounded them. The servants looked surprised, whispering among themselves, but Karim gave them a firm look that silenced all questions. He guided Ayan and Mira to a sofa in the living room and asked the cook to bring warm food. The children sat quietly, unsure whether they were allowed to touch anything. When the food arrived, steaming rice, bread, and curry, their eyes widened again. Karim encouraged them softly, "Go ahead. Eat." At first, they hesitated. But hunger took over, and soon they were eating quickly, almost as if they were afraid the food would disappear. Karim watched them silently, his heart heavy yet strangely peaceful. He had never seen anyone enjoy food this way. Every bite they took felt like a victory over the hunger they had suffered. After the meal, Karim showed them to a guest room. The room had 2 beds with soft blankets and pillows. The children touched the sheets with disbelief. For them, this was like a dream. Mira's eyes sparkled, and she whispered, "It's so soft, bye." Karim smiled faintly for the first time in a long while. "You can rest here tonight. You are safe now." The children lay down, still whispering to each other. Karim stood by the door for a moment, watching them. For the first time in years, his mansion did not feel empty. For the first time in years, he felt like he had done something that truly mattered. As he walked back to his own room, he thought about what had just happened. He had not planned any of this. He had only stepped out of the car to ask a simple question. But now, 2 children were under his roof, looking to him for care. He asked himself, "What am I doing? Can I really take care of them?" But another voice inside him answered, "You have everything they need. And maybe, they have everything you need too." That night, Karim lay awake in bed, listening to the faint sound of rain outside. For the first time, the silence of the house did not feel unbearable. Somewhere in the guest room, 2 little hearts were beating under warm blankets. And somehow, that made all the difference. The next morning, Karim woke up earlier than usual. He had not slept much, but strangely he did not feel tired. His thoughts had been occupied all night with the 2 children who were now sleeping in his guest room. For years, he had woken up in silence, hearing nothing but the sound of birds outside or the rustling of trees in his garden. But today, when he stepped out of his bedroom, he could faintly hear the voices of children. Their soft laughter floated through the hallway, and it filled the mansion with a warmth he had never known before. He walked quietly toward the guest room. The door was half open. Inside, he saw Ayan and Mira sitting on the bed. They were awake, talking in whispers, their little faces looking brighter than the night before. Mira was holding a pillow tightly as if she couldn't believe it was real, while Ayan was staring at the curtains, amazed at their size and design. When they noticed Karim standing at the door, they quickly became quiet, unsure how he would react. Karim gave them a gentle smile. "Did you sleep well?" he asked softly. Mira nodded shyly, and Ayan said, "Yes, thank you." "Good," Karim replied. "Come, let's have breakfast." The children followed him into the dining room. The long table that had always felt too big for him suddenly didn't look so empty anymore. The cook served warm milk, bread, eggs, and fruit. Ayan and Mira looked at the food as if it were a feast. They ate slowly this time, a little more relaxed than the night before. Karim sat with them, watching quietly. It felt strange but nice. He realized that he had never shared a meal with anyone in that house before. But as the days passed, things were not as easy as Karim thought they would be. The children were not used to living in such a big and polished place. They often felt nervous around the servants, who whispered behind their backs. Sometimes, when Karim spoke in his usual serious tone, the children became frightened, thinking he was angry with them. They had lived too long in fear and uncertainty to trust quickly. One afternoon, Karim found Mira hiding behind the sofa in the living room. She looked worried. "What are you doing there?" he asked. She whispered, "The lady in the kitchen scolded me. I broke a glass by mistake. I didn't mean to, but she looked so angry." Karim bent down and lifted her gently into his arms. "Don't be afraid," he said. "It was just a glass. Glasses can be replaced. You are more important than that." Mira's eyes softened, but she still clung to his shirt as if afraid he would change his mind. That moment made Karim realize how fragile they both were, how much patience and love they needed to heal. Ayan, on the other hand, struggled in different ways. He wanted to be strong and independent, but deep down, he was still a child longing for guidance. Sometimes, Karim found him wandering alone in the garden, staring at the ground. When asked what he was thinking, Ayan would reply, "I don't want to be a burden. If we trouble you, we can leave." Those words cut Karim deeply. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and said firmly, "You are not a burden. You belong here now. This is your home." But still, Ayan took time to believe it. After years of rejection, it was hard for him to accept kindness so easily. The first few weeks were full of such struggles. The children were not used to sleeping in soft beds. Sometimes, they woke up in the middle of the night, scared by dreams of the street. Karim heard their cries and went to comfort them, sitting by their beds until they fell asleep again. The mansion that once echoed with silence now echoed with small footsteps, laughter, and sometimes tears. It was not easy, but it was real. Slowly, Karim began changing as well. His strict face, once always serious, started softening. His voice, once cold and businesslike, began to carry warmth. He learned to listen more, to notice the small things that made the children happy. He bought Mira colorful dresses and dolls, and she lit up with joy when she saw them. He gave Ayan books and puzzles, noticing how sharp the boy's mind was. They were not gifts meant to show off wealth, they were gestures of love. At first, the children didn't know how to react. They had never received gifts before. But slowly, they began to accept them with smiles. Mira even started drawing little pictures and secretly placing them on Karim's desk. One day, Karim found a drawing of 3 figures holding hands: a tall man, a small boy, and a little girl. Underneath, she had written with crooked letters, "Family." Karim stared at the drawing for a long time, his heart swelling with emotions he could not name. That simple picture meant more to him than any award or business deal he had ever achieved. Of course, not every day was perfect. There were times when Karim became impatient. Once, Ayan spilled juice on the carpet, and Karim's tone rose without him realizing it. The boy froze, his eyes wide with fear, expecting harsh punishment. But then Karim saw the terror on the child's face, and guilt washed over him. He knelt down and said, "I'm sorry, Ayan. I didn't mean to scare you. It's just a carpet, it can be cleaned. Don't ever think you're in danger here." That night, Karim lay in bed thinking about how much he had to learn. Money had taught him many skills, but not how to be a father. That, he realized, would take patience, mistakes, and love. The neighbors soon noticed the change too. They saw Karim walking in the garden with two children holding his hands. They saw him buying ice cream from a street vendor, something no one had imagined the serious millionaire would ever do. Slowly, whispers spread about how Karim had brought orphans into his home. Some people admired him, while others doubted his intentions. But Karim did not care what the world thought. For the first time in his life, he was living for something real. One evening, he took the children for a drive to the park. Ayan and Mira ran freely on the grass, laughing as they chased each other. Karim sat on a bench, watching them with a smile. He realized how much his life had changed in such a short time. The emptiness that once haunted him was fading, replaced by the sound of laughter and the warmth of little hands holding his. But deep inside, he also knew this was just the beginning. Trust was growing, but slowly. The children still carried scars of the past, and Karim carried fears of his own. He wondered if he could truly become the father they needed. Yet one thing was certain: he no longer wanted to return to his old life of silence and loneliness. As the sun set that evening, Mira came running to him and climbed into his lap. "Uncle Karim," she said softly, "will you always keep us with you?" Karim's throat tightened. He wrapped his arms around her and answered, "Yes, always. You are mine now, and I am yours." Ayan stood nearby, watching quietly, but Karim saw a glimmer of trust in his eyes too. For the first time, Karim felt that his mansion was not just a house, it was becoming a home. And for the first time, he began to understand that love is not bought or found by chance. It is built slowly, through care, patience, and a promise to never let go. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. The house that had once been filled with silence was now alive with laughter, little footsteps, and chatter that never seemed to stop. Karim often found himself smiling without even realizing it. The serious man who once thought only about profits and meetings now found joy in small things: watching Mira braid her doll's hair, or seeing Ayan's eyes shine when he solved a difficult puzzle. The change in Karim was not sudden, it came slowly, like the sunrise that first lights the sky softly before filling it with brightness. Before, his mornings had always started with newspapers and phone calls from his business partners. Now, his mornings began with Mira running into his room, giggling, to wake him up, or with Ayan politely knocking and saying, "Uncle, breakfast is ready." The cook prepared the meals, but the children always sat eagerly at the table, waiting for him to join them. At first, Karim had thought he was giving them shelter, food, and comfort. But soon he realized they were giving him something much greater. They were giving him a reason to live with joy again. His mansion no longer felt like a museum. It began to feel like a home. The walls that once echoed with silence now carried the sound of children's laughter. One evening, Karim was sitting in his study, looking over some business files, when Mira walked in holding a piece of paper. She smiled shyly and handed it to him. It was another drawing, this time of a house with 3 people standing in front of it, their hands joined together. She had written, "Our home," at the top. Karim stared at it for a long time, his eyes growing misty. He carefully placed the drawing inside a frame and kept it on his desk. For him, it was more valuable than any certificate or award hanging on his walls. The children began to change too. When they first came, they were shy, quiet, and full of fear. But slowly, they began to trust. Mira's laughter became louder, and she would run around the garden chasing butterflies, her dress fluttering in the wind. Ayaan, once always cautious, now began asking questions about the world. He loved books, and Karim bought him a small library filled with stories, puzzles, and encyclopedias. The boy's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he read about places he had never seen. Karim sometimes sat with him, answering his questions patiently. Karim himself was surprised at how much patience he had discovered within himself. The man who once had no time for anyone was now spending hours teaching Ayaan to play chess or helping Mira paint. His business associates noticed the difference in him too. In meetings, he looked calmer, more thoughtful. He no longer rushed through things. When asked about his new piece, he only smiled, but inside he knew the answer: it was the children. The servants in the mansion also began to change. At first, they had been shocked and even doubtful about Karim bringing 2 orphans into his home. But as they saw his love for the children, their hearts softened too. The cook started preparing special dishes Mira liked. The gardener let Ayaan help him plant flowers. Slowly, the whole household adjusted, and the mansion grew warmer, not just in temperature, but in spirit. One day, Karim took the children shopping. They walked through the busy market, something Karim had not done for years. Usually, he sent his staff for such errands, but now he wanted the experience. Ayaan and Mira were amazed by the colorful stalls, the toys, the clothes, and the sweets. Mira tugged at his hand when she saw a small teddy bear. Karim bought it for her, and her face lit up with joy. Ayaan chose a simple notebook and pencil, saying he wanted to write his own stories. Karim placed his hand proudly on the boy's shoulder. On their way back, people recognized Karim and whispered about him. Some said, "Look, the rich man has changed. He looks happy now." Karim heard them but did not mind. For the first time, he felt proud not because of his wealth, but because of the little family walking beside him. There were also moments that touched him deeply. One night, as he was tucking Mira into bed, she looked up and asked in her sweet voice, "Uncle Karim, can I call you Papa?" The question caught him by surprise. His throat tightened, and he felt tears welling in his eyes. He bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Yes, my child. You can call me Papa." From that night onward, both Ayaan and Mira began calling him Papa, and every time he heard it, his heart swelled with happiness. Karim started noticing changes within himself too. The things that once gave him stress no longer seemed so important. Before, he spent long hours in his office, chasing bigger deals, bigger profits. Now, he finished his work earlier just so he could be home in time for dinner with the children. He found himself laughing more, even playing games in the garden. Sometimes he wondered if people who knew him from before would even recognize him now. The children also taught him lessons about love and simplicity. One afternoon, they were all sitting under a tree in the garden. Ayaan suddenly asked, "Papa, are we rich now because we live in this big house?" Karim thought for a moment and then said, "No, Ayaan. We are not rich because of the house or the cars. We are rich because we have each other." Ayaan nodded seriously, as if storing those words deep in his heart. Mira then giggled and added, "Then we are the richest family in the world." Karim laughed and hugged them both tightly. He realized that the girl was right. Every day brought a new memory, a new lesson. There were still challenges, times when the children cried remembering their parents, or times when Karim doubted his ability to raise them. But each challenge only made their bond stronger. Whenever Mira felt scared, Karim was there to hold her. Whenever Ayaan had questions, Karim was there to answer patiently. Slowly, the children began to heal, and so did Karim. Neighbors and relatives who once only saw Karim as a serious, distant man now saw him differently. They admired how the millionaire who once lived in silence had transformed into a loving father. Some even brought their own children over to play with Ayaan and Mira, and soon the mansion echoed not just with 2 voices but with many. One evening, as Karim sat by the fireplace with both children leaning against him, he thought about his life. He realized that the emptiness that once haunted him had completely disappeared. In its place was a deep sense of belonging. He had not just rescued two children from the roadside, they had rescued him too, from a life of loneliness. That night, as Ayan and Mira slept peacefully, Karim stood by their beds, watching their gentle breaths. He whispered softly, "You two gave me a new life. I thought I was helping you, but you are the ones who saved me." For the first time, he understood the meaning of true wealth. It was not in the bank accounts, not in the cars or the mansion. True wealth was in the love he had found, the family he had built, and the laughter that now time moved gently in the mansion, and with every passing day, the bond between Karim, Ayan, and Mira grew deeper. What had started as a sudden decision on a rainy night had now turned into a new life that none of them could imagine living without. The children no longer saw themselves as guests or outsiders. They ran freely in the halls, laughed in the garden, and sat comfortably beside Karim as if they had always belonged there. Karim, too, no longer felt like a man weighed down by loneliness. He looked healthier, happier, and more at peace. His once cold eyes now carried warmth, and his face often carried a smile. The mansion that had once been filled with silence had truly become a home. Yet deep in his heart, Karim knew one more step remained. He wanted to make sure the children would never again feel abandoned, never again fear being left alone. One evening, while the children were playing in the garden, Karim sat in his study, thinking seriously. He took out his pen and papers and wrote a long note to his lawyer. The next morning, he called him over. When the lawyer arrived, Karim said firmly, "I want to adopt these children. I want them to be mine legally, not just in my heart." The lawyer looked surprised but smiled. "That is a noble decision, sir. I will prepare all the documents. But it will take some time." Karim nodded. "Take all the time you need, but make sure it is done. I don't want them to ever feel like they don't have a family." When he later shared the news with Ayan and Mira, their reaction touched him deeply. Ayan's eyes filled with tears, though he tried to hide them because he wanted to appear strong. Mira jumped into Karim's arms and whispered, "So you will be our papa forever." Karim hugged them both tightly and said, "Yes, forever. Nothing will separate us now." The adoption process took a few weeks, and during that time, Karim realized just how much his life had changed. He found himself making plans for the future not just for himself, but for Ayan and Mira. He thought about their education, their dreams, and the kind of life he wanted them to live. He spoke to teachers, visited schools, and even planned to set up scholarships in their names so that other orphaned children could also get an education. The day the adoption papers were finalized, Karim took the children to the court with him. The judge asked Ayan and Mira if they wanted to live with Karim permanently. Ayan, standing tall for his age, said, "Yes, because he is not just a rich man. He is our papa." Mira added softly, "He gave us love when we had nothing." The judge smiled, signed the papers, and declared them a family. That moment was one of the happiest of Karim's life. He held both children's hands as they walked out of the court, feeling lighter than ever before. For him, the titles of millionaire or businessman no longer mattered. The only title that mattered now was Papa. Life after the adoption became even more beautiful. Karim threw a small celebration in the mansion. For the first time, the house was filled with neighbors, relatives, and friends, not for a business deal but for a family occasion. The halls echoed with music, children's laughter, and genuine happiness. Mira wore a pink dress, dancing around the room, while Ayan proudly stood beside Karim, introducing him as his father. From that day, Karim noticed something powerful. People around him began to see him differently. Before, they had respected him for his money and power. Now, they respected him for his kindness. Business partners admired his decision, and some even started helping orphanages and schools after being inspired by him. Without even realizing it, Karim's one act of compassion had begun to create ripples of change in the community. But beyond all that, what mattered most to Karim was the peace in his heart. His days no longer felt empty. He enjoyed walking Ayan and Mira to school, listening to their stories in the evening, and watching them grow. Ayan showed interest in becoming a writer, filling his notebooks with stories and poems. Karim encouraged him, buying him more books and praising his creativity. Mira, on the other hand, loved painting. She often painted pictures of their little family, filling pages with colors that spoke of joy and love. Karim proudly displayed her artwork in the living room, replacing the expensive paintings he had once bought from galleries. To him, her little drawings carried more meaning than any masterpiece in the world. One winter evening, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Ayan was reading aloud from a book, and Mira was sitting on Karim's lap, humming a little tune. Karim leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, listening to the sound of their voices. He thought about his past, the endless meetings, the quiet nights, the heavy loneliness. And then he thought about his present, the laughter, the love, the feeling of belonging. The difference was like night and day. He realized that wealth had never given him this kind of peace. For years, he had collected money, thinking it would fill the emptiness in his heart. But money could not hug him, could not call him Papa, could not draw pictures of family. Only love could do that. And now, he finally had it. Ayan and Mira healed too. Their faces no longer carried the constant shadow of fear. They smiled freely, played without worry, and dreamed about the future. Karim noticed how different they were from the scared children he had first seen on that rainy night. They were blossoming, and he was proud to be the reason behind it. Sometimes, Karim wondered what would have happened if he had not stopped his car that night. The thought frightened him. He was grateful that life had given him the chance to change not only their destiny but also his own. Years later, people continued to talk about the lonely millionaire who had turned his life around by adopting 2 orphans. But for Karim, it was never about what people said. It was about the promise he had made to 2 children that they would never be alone again. And he kept that promise, every single day. One night, as the children were falling asleep, Mira asked softly, "Papa, do you ever feel lonely now?" Karim smiled, brushed her hair gently, and said, "No, my dear. Because I have you and Ayan. You gave me a family. You gave me love. How could I ever be lonely again?" Mira closed her eyes with a smile, and Ayan, half asleep, whispered, "We love you, Papa." Karim sat there for a while, watching them sleep. His heart was full, his soul at peace. The man who once lived in silence had now found the music of life in the voices of 2 children. The man who once searched for meaning in money had now found it in love. And in that quiet moment, Karim knew that this was the greatest gift life had ever given him, not his wealth, not his success, but the simple, unbreakable bond of family.